Welcome to the Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world hearing their stories about growing a business. Today, we're talking not only about how to get your finances in line, but how to manage the priorities in your life. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, we're here today with Dustin Serviss, a successful business owner in the wealth and lifestyle design space and the founder of Serviss Wealth Management. Dustin is also the host of the Picture of Wealth podcast, where he gives his insights on investing, personal finance, money saving, income sources, tax strategies, and insurance tips to help his audience be great at money decisions. Dustin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. So my first question for you is, what would you say is the biggest thing that you did or you are doing that has helped you achieve the freedom to do what you enjoy?
That's a great opening question. So I would say the first thing that came to mind was my Fridays off. So 4 years ago, I started, it didn't start right away, but it was going mountain biking from 8 till 10 in the morning on Fridays with two other guys. And so I said, man, one's a busy accountant and one's a busy lawyer. How are they able to go biking? You know, if I'm not first in the office and last out, then I'm obviously not successful, or my team won't think that that's leadership. And I had all these different beliefs, but they were, now knowing that they were wrong. But I thought, you know what, what's the risk? What's the worst that can happen by going out for a bike ride with an accountant and a lawyer and have a good visit and, get into the office by 10:30. So that led to it was the accountant said, hey, my house is close to the bike park. Let's have a coffee after. And I was kind of like, and you're trying to be cool in the parking lot. And, we just had a good ride. And I was like thinking in my head, I'm like, I got to get to the office. And I thought, what the heck, I'm going to go. So, that led to coffee became a regular thing. And he had a beautiful pool and it overlooked the city, and you'd have a coffee. So then I get to the office about 11:30. So then it became, I'm going to try this. I'm going to be available to my staff by cell phone on Fridays. Anyone can get me, but I'm not coming in. And so the idea was that I wanted to write a book. I wanted to do all these creative pursuits. And I thought on Fridays, I'm going to just do those. I'm going to mountain bike, have a coffee, and then be available to staff. But I'm going to work on those projects that always get pushed to the bottom. And I'll tell you what a powerful thing for increasing productivity on Thursdays. But that freedom, just one little thing to free up so much bandwidth that it gave way more creativity to Monday to Thursday. And I think now looking back and what we talk about to people and coaches, there's never going to be an email that comes in and says, hey, you're approved to take Fridays off. You're always going to be busy. People say, I got to just wait till I get this. I got to get my systems right. I got to get the right person. The reality is there's always going to be new problems. And so I thought, the jumping off point was like, well, I'm going to try it as an experiment. The worst that can happen is I go back to working. Being on the pulse, again, Thursday and Monday, maybe some businesses you just couldn't do that. There would be too much turmoil, that would happen. But for lots of businesses, there wouldn't be. And if you got good people and you just say, hey, you're transparent with staff. Listen, I'm going out, and I positioned it to my staff as a networking. It's an accountant, a lawyer, and I'm a financial planner. So it all kind of fit. It was like, well, that time I'm kind of justifying it because I'm networking, even though they're two close friends. But now the staff know, a lot of my staff is new. They come on, they're like, well, they know I don't work Fridays. And so we get together on Thursdays. They try and ask all their questions in that time, and then we connect again on Mondays. So that's, I know, a long-winded answer to your question, but that was a big one for me for getting. It's just commitment to that time off.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can definitely resonate with that. I don't exactly take Fridays off myself, but I do try to give myself time off to just say, hey, today I'm going to do whatever. And sometimes that might be not spending time with family or friends, but that might even be just a productivity thing, like you said, where knowing that I'm going to ignore any other distractions today and just focus on this. And it's difficult to do that as your business grows, because you get to this point where it's like, well, the customer questions, the leads, whatever, it doesn't stop coming in. And so it gets really easy to feel like, well, I can't stop. It's still there. I have to work nonstop because it's there. But it doesn't stop, right? And like you have to sleep, right? So eventually, like what happens when you sleep? Does everything like fall to pieces? No. So why not say
That's
like,
a great one.
I'm
I
gonna
might
take
use that. That's a good one.
yeah. So why not say I'm gonna take a couple more hours here or there and use that? And in reality, like it's not even just about taking off, but like it's what that gives you, because it helps clear your mind. It helps open you up to be more creative when you do go back to work, or if you are working, it helps you really stay focused on that one thing that will help you provide more value to your customers over time, instead of answering every question an hour or two faster or something like this.
It's very true. It's very true. My highlight right now, we moved about a couple years ago to a different town, so I don't mountain bike with those particular guys. But the highlight for Fridays off in the spring and summer is actually taking, it was my 4-year-old who was in preschool, and going for a coffee meeting with him. And I talk to my kids. I have 2 sons, 5 and 7. I talk to them just like I'm, talking to a normal person. So I'm sure lots of people will go, oh, there's that guy at the coffee shop again with his kid. And we crush a full hour, whipped cream, hot chocolate, and just visit. And, from, maybe we'll get into it, I'm sure. But again, this was a major thing that work-life balance was not a thing that came natural to me. It was work first, family second. And if the work wasn't going well, then how could I provide for the family? And so to now, again, the creation of the Picture Wealth podcast and some of the tools that we're using now over the last kind of 3-4 years in my own life, and what we help clients with, it really is cool to see your own journey come full circle. Because to think at 10 a.m. on a Friday, I'm sitting at a coffee shop with my 4-year-old, relaxed, listening to what he's saying, talking to him, and then, maybe we're going to go for a bike right after. Maybe I'm going to go home and read. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to go take my wife for lunch. There's just so many options. That is very foreign to, it's normal now. It was very foreign to me. If you would have met me 5 years ago, that would have been impossible. So I think, listener, you're maybe saying, well, it does, the money come first, or do you commit first? And that's, again, maybe we'll get into that, but I think that's an important thing to touch on is, what does come first? Is it, if you have money, then you can totally do that, or could you do that first? So let you decide where you want to take that.
Yeah, that's true. Like that's a challenge, because even people listening to this, they might say, oh, that's great for you guys that you found out how to do that. But then like, maybe my business isn't in a great place right now. Like, how do I make that decision? And like, nobody teaches you that. Definitely. That is something that it takes effort and conscious effort and skill to work out for yourself and make that decision. And also it is something that it can shift over time, right? So there may be times when you want to spend more time with friends or family, and you're going to take Thursday and Friday off, or take a week or two off, whatever. But there may also be times when like the business really needs you, and you have to decide, is this really the time that the business does need me, that I have to spend a little bit more time in it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So in your model, and again, listener, if you're an online course provider, or somebody that's, a coach, or, you're collecting recurring revenue. So there is a metric that's easy to follow there. And I think of the first tool we teach people about in wealth management or coaching one is something called BAM, which is your bare ass minimum, BAM. And these are the minimum expenses that exist for you to exist. So this is your mortgage or your rent payment, this is your car payment or your groceries. Never mind the Louis Vuitton or the travel, or, I'm a big motorsports guy. That spending that can all go away. If you were just down to the bare ass minimum, you wouldn't have those expenses. So once you find that number, you've got your BAM. You then know, you could look at your courses, how many courses, or a monthly subscription, or how many people would I have to get to cover my BAM? And then you kind of have a choice, because once the volume of income is coming in that's higher than that, you could up your spending, which I support, because I think that's important. Or you could look at me, I'm going to keep my spending the same. I'm going to invest it. So you can invest it in whatever XYZ market index, whatever you want to pick. So you can invest it in something that produces some return, and in the future will be that for you. Real estate could be part of that too. Or you could say, I'm going to keep spending what I'm spending, but I'm going to reinvest in leverage in the business. And that could be, I'm thinking Upwork, I'm thinking Fiverr, I'm thinking I think it's called Overdrive or Overpass. It's basically like Upwork. You can get contractors for projects. And taking that money and say, okay, well, every month I've got an extra $1,500, $2,000. I'm going to take $400 for me, kind of up my lifestyle. And I'm going to take $400 and I'm going to put that into an investment. And I'm going to take $1,000 or $800 or however that math works out. And I'm going to reinvest that and purposely spend it on growth things. And again, there's a huge scope of where you could spend that money. But if you're not getting enough people, or you got better equipment would give you a better course. If you got lots of people, but your game isn't as good as it could be, you could up your cameras. You could, every month I'm trying to spend money on whatever sort of growth things, silo, whatever bucket, the most overused words around, but like whatever those things are to try and move the needle. And entrepreneurship 101, you have no idea if your spending is actually going to work. That the general gist is, but that's kind of the exciting part, because some of the things you think are pretty basic might be home runs. And then the other things you don't know, but you've got to just continue that activity to max level.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to go into that a little bit deeper, because I think this is something I feel like came a little bit natural to me as an entrepreneur, but I've seen a lot of small business owners where they're kind of afraid to invest in themselves when it comes to saying like, oh, well, if I could buy this software, this equipment, this contractor to help me, then it could speed me up and help me grow. That's not like the first thing that they think of. And they may tend to think, well, I'm just going to save my money. And by save their money, it's not even like a conscious like investment to save it. It's more just like leave it sitting there. And I'm kind of the mindset that like the money isn't useful until you use it for some purpose. Sounds like you're kind of like thinking that way as well. So, because you mentioned like investing it, upgrading your lifestyle, in creating leverage in your business. So what would you say to somebody who's maybe struggling with that idea?
Well, the framework that I use for myself, and again, listener, you might have your own journey, and I only share this just because it worked for us. But, again, I mentioned at the start, family first and work, that didn't happen. It was business, then family. And I always thought it was, you could be really successful in business, or you could be a really good dad and a husband. You couldn't have both. So, how could you be balanced, when you're really a success? So, we had a really hard sort of, it was a hard fertility journey, which was super stressful on our marriage and for all the different reasons. But I wanted to really stick my head in the sand and not pay attention to what was happening at home. I just thought, well, this will sort itself out, first year, second year, and it didn't. I started working harder, didn't want to go home and address like the issues and talk about things, because it was harder on my wife, but harder on us as well. And so it was a tool that we now call the spending accelerator, but it was originally called the corporate cash savings model, I think, but we call it the spending accelerator. And what this tool was is I built a spreadsheet that is basically like, imagine a machine that is in your basement, and every start of the month, first of the month, you go downstairs and out this machine comes $10,000. I'm just pulling an income number out. So $10,000 comes out and onto a conveyor belt. And that $10,000 is moving along the conveyor belt, and there's buckets underneath the conveyor belt. So the first bucket kicks off your BAM. So that's the monthly expenses that we had. So I need to kick off a little bit into that. Then moving along is the next bucket, which would be emergency savings bucket. So maybe we'll put $500 into that. So that kicks it off. So then, moving along is the investment bucket. We call it a core investment. This is the thing that the boring, whether you do the S&P 500 index or you do a dividend stock, you pick, but something that's not going to potentially blow up or have, significant risk. So you've got that sort of middle of the road core investment. Then we got a high risk bucket. So again, my thing is penny stock and crypto. Not that active in it right now, but was. I would put a smaller amount into that. So enough that if it goes up or when it goes up, you're going to feel it and it's going to be exciting, but not enough that when it goes to zero and you lose all your money, you are impacted your family's ability to put groceries on the table. So some little bit goes in there. And then you might have a real estate. So some people say, I don't really like the stock market. I like to save for real estate. I want to buy a rental. Okay, great. Then have a real estate bucket that puts money in there. And the real estate bucket could be in front of the stock bucket, depending on listener, your philosophy on things. And then if it's done right, you'd have at the end of the conveyor belt, still a little bit of money that's coming off the end. And so you say, okay, well, that I'm purposely going to spend on. You could spend it on whatever you want, but have it be in line with your goals. So one of the things, the example client I have, she was saying, I want to be more active. I want to get outside more. So we were brainstorming, and again, it's wintertime out right now, but this is a couple of years ago. She said, my friends go snowshoeing. Mine are always breaking and they don't really work good in my boots. And so I was looking at her BAM, or her bare ass minimum expenses, and I was looking down the items and I said, wow, you pay $300 a month for cable TV. And she's like, yeah. Isn't that kind of normal? I said, no, it's not normal for two reasons. One, your goal is to be outside more. Two, that's an expensive cable package. So could you get by? Like, what are you watching? Like, you must have the best NHRA drag racing and like fishing TV and like all this. And she goes, no, we got some sports, And so she ended up cutting the cable package down to $150. And then we said, okay, in 3 months, you're going to have $450. You could buy a pretty good pair of snowshoes for that. Now that fits with your goals. And, you're going to have one of the best pair of snowshoes that you're in your old friend group. So it's a higher ticket item where people are now realizing like, oh, I can actually get a better quality thing. But I've always stayed away from that because you don't ever buy the most expensive thing. That's not how, you should get ahead. Well, no, getting ahead starts with this model. So again, if someone is struggling with, even if you're like, well, I don't have extra money, I've given you the BAM and I've given you the spending accelerator ideas to just, if you don't kind of get optics on what your scenario looks like or what a good plan looks like, then it's very hard to sort of set your course because you go, okay, I know the framework. Now I can work towards, I need to have extra money at the end of the month. That might be the step one. I don't have an extra 10,000 at the end of the month. Okay, well, let's work on 1,000 because it all still works the same. And once you've established the framework, now the fun begins because now you can look ahead, say 15 years, 10 years, 20 years, and say, okay, well, if I just did these kind of 1,000 here, 500 there, and I kept that going, okay, I could totally live on, that number when I retire. And so then you go, okay, well, if that number is higher than what you need to live, then you could save less into some of those buckets, which means more would spit out the end of the conveyor belt to spend now. So it gives you, sort of that permission to spend more now on you fill in the blank, listener.
Yeah, I like that. And having that knowledge and that being able to see that picture of your own finances really removes that uncertainty that allows you to either say like, okay, this is, now I don't have to worry about things because I know it's all set up. I figured it out. Or maybe you find like, okay, well, you know what? I wish that now that I did this whole exercise, I wish that I could earn a little bit more. Now you have that motivation of seeing the picture to say like, well, now I want to do this to find a way to generate more income. But I also like that idea, the story you mentioned about the snowshoes, because I've always had the thought that like when you see somebody who purchased some kind of item that suddenly you think to yourself like, oh, that would be cool to have. And the way I look at it is if like for the average person, even if you don't have some crazy level of income, everybody can spend disproportionately on at least one thing in their life. And so what you're looking at sometimes is just what that person chose. And so you have to think to yourself, like, is that thing that you're seeing that's interesting to you, if it's the snowshoes, whatever, is that the thing that you want to spend like disproportionately on? And if you think of it that way, and if it's not, then okay, well, that's fine. But when you see somebody who has some kind of hobby, or they're buying some kind of fancy, I don't know, fancy watch or fancy shoes, something like this, you have to think to yourself that like that's the thing that they're choosing to spend a lot on. And so even if you're not so wealthy that you can just spend in everything, most likely, if you go through this exercise like you're talking about, you can find one area of your life where you're like, well, this is what I'm going to spend a lot more in.
Yeah, it starts with establishing, what your values are and what your goals are, and sort of talking about those openly. What you made me just think of was I just had a call yesterday from a gentleman who, it's very classic for after sort of a hard year. So again, last year wasn't very fun in the market. We're kind of trying to battle back now, but he said, my friends say they got this, and this is an older gentleman. And I have some clients who have been referred to me, and I've put them in different investments. And so here's a scenario where you have two clients that get different rates of return. And they say, well, so-and-so said, their friends, they got a better return than this. And so why is our return lower? And again, they're both in positive territory in this particular example, but what everyone doesn't realize, and listener, I would ask you, have you ever been somewhere, looked at someone and said, either like what you're mentioning, Brian, of like, that would be nice, or how did they do that? Or, how did they achieve that or something? Being someone who's been in the wealth business for 18 years and studied many different clients, tons of wealthy people, turned away lots of people just because it wasn't a fit. So I get to see lots of scenarios. You never know what really is behind the curtain. You never really know that the person who you never thought would have a grandma that passed away in another country and leaves them $2,000 a month extra. So it's like, well, how is that person driving around in that car? Well, guess what? They don't tell you. I know because I deal with both of them, but they, have this extra money coming in. The other scenarios are sometimes people, and a lot of our clients are quietly wealthy and they're not flashy, is you don't know the level of wealth of the people around you. So if someone is getting a higher rate of return than you, it might mean that their risk tolerance is higher, which you don't really know someone's risk tolerance unless you're in a position like me where you're questioning someone for an hour about it. And so they've picked riskier investments. And so they aren't you. They don't feel the same as you when they open their statement and it's up or down. You might not know that person has an extra 2 million than you. Well, that person with the extra 2 million has a higher risk tolerance because their ability to fluctuate through things is far greater than someone with, say, 600,000. So, and again, put them in the older age categories. If you're 28 and, you have a long time horizon, then your risk tolerance maybe, again, everyone's different, could be higher. But again, there's so much emotion, history, old gristle, belief gristle, what your parents have put in your head, what you've observed as being right. And so again, there's no right or wrong answer in risk tolerance. It really just has to be experienced by you. So I know it's a long story to get to what you're saying, though, that it's like when we see things, and with the social media nowadays, it's I have friends with Bentleys, and you see it's just like, oh my goodness, like how's this work? But you're only seeing small parts of it. So thanks a lot for bringing that up, Brian. I think that's important.
Oh yeah. Thanks for sharing that kind of view on it as well with the risk tolerance. So I want to ask, how did you get into the wealth management industry? Was that something like you were always felt you were interested in finances?
Yeah, like from a young age, like I had a paper route at 8, and I was trying to hustle around the neighborhood and try and sell to people on my route that weren't getting the paper, and I was unsuccessful in 3 years. But so from 8 to working on ranches to working at a golf course to working at a mill, it's just the mill work was I'd go to school in high school. I got hired when I was my 16th birthday. It was my first shift because you needed a license to drive the forklift. So, those are long-standing memories that I have that I look back and go, it looks intentional now. I didn't realize it. I just was, looking around my hometown, which at that time was maybe 100,000 people. And it was like, well, where are the best jobs? And Saturday, Sunday shifts, you got time on Saturday and then time and a half after 8. And, we worked 12. So then it was, I think, double time after 10. On Sundays, it was time and a half all day. Then double time over, so I would work weekends. And so, you'd make, reasonable money there. But my passion originally was civil engineering is what I took in university. And at the time it was the Alberta oil patch, kind of, Western Canada was going crazy in, the year 2002. So when I graduated, I went there, and I was, in an office. I started in the field doing surveying, so minus 40 degrees C, walking around the oil patch and fields and doing that. And then I gravitated into the office. And once I got in the office, I started to realize it was, I could be on the computer. And so at that time, this is 2003, the stocks. And so I went into the bank and I got a $50,000 line of credit, unsecured. I was 21, interest only payments. And they said, well, what are you going to use this for? I said, oh, I'm going to trade stocks. And they said, okay, no problem. So this is pre-financial crisis, and maybe that's where the problem started. But so then I'm 21, and now looking back, realize how risky and how lucky I probably was that I didn't implode myself. But the reality was I made more than I lost. I lost, but I made money. And my philosophy was, and again, I was working in the oil patch, making reasonable money, and I had a savings account. And so what I thought was, I've got the savings account of, let's call it 50,000. And I've got this $50,000 line of credit. I'm going to max it out. I'm going to trade these stocks for hours, days, whatever, and get out and try and clear the line of credit, make a spread. I thought, okay, well, if this stock goes to zero and I end up with this line of credit, how many months of interest only would my savings of 50,000 cover? Because I thought, okay, well, that 50,000 at interest only on a 50 grand line of credit would be like years. So I thought, well, I'll just keep paying interest only, and I'll go work as a rig guy on the rigs, because they were making like 160, 190,000 a year. And I thought, it's going to be crappy work, but I'll go do that and I'll pay off that line of credit. So that never happened, thankfully. But that was my rationale in doing it. So long story short, working in the engineering office, people started coming to me and say, hey, like, what kind of stocks are you looking at? And there was a group of guys who were 10 years older than me that I met at the gym, who we would sit down on Sundays, and we used to use this thing called Value Line, which it was, I think Warren Buffett owns it, but I don't think he created it. It basically is a weekly newspaper. And again, even with the internet, it's a newsprint thing. I don't know if they printed, they probably just do it on the internet now, but it was a booklet of like 600 companies. And we would sit at Starbucks for 4 hours, and we would just, each page is a company. And we would just have these little markers that we just look at the page, and it was just all this metrics, really small text of like what the company. So we just look, and there was a few things we'd all look for, and we'd fold the bottom of the page. Then when we'd sit down at the end for the last hour, we'd all compare and see if we could find one page that we all like folded. And that was a very, very archaic way of sort of screening stocks. And then we'd all spend the next week sort of researching that stock. So those guys were instrumental. Out of 2002, 3, 4, 5, the market was rallying out of the tech crash. So it wasn't necessarily that my stock picks or the RSP funds or the pension funds that I was helping people in the office pick were good. It just the market was going up. So I liked working with people. I liked dealing with money. I wanted to drive a Ferrari and be a stockbroker. So I left the engineering job, came back to my hometown, got a job as a stockbroker, and it was just brutal. It was like literally, here's the postal code list, call these postal codes and try and get a meeting. It was impossible. I was 24 years old, 23 years old, trying to call wealthy people. It didn't work well. So I left there. I joined 2 other guys, and so I worked with them for 8 years and was sort of their advanced case specialist. I had all the credentials because I thought, you know what, if nothing else, I'm going to get educated and get all the best letters behind my name that I can, that if this business flops, I can always go work for an insurance company and probably, make over, 6 figures. So I thought that's my safety net. And then in 2014, I asked to have my name on the sign, and or I was going to maybe make a move, and they said no, and said that I wouldn't be getting my name on the sign. So I left and started, Serviss Wealth had existed before, but started Serviss Wealth as its own entity. And so that's, where we've been for 8-9 years now.
Cool. So for the entrepreneur listening to this, assuming most of them probably are individual, like single person businesses at this point, but even if they're not, how much sense does it make, or how much time should someone spend like staying up to date, researching markets and investments, and like balancing that with running and growing their business? Or is that something that they should really, in general, not do too much at all, and then just kind of stick with a safe like investment?
I think what it starts with is something we call the wealth edge. And so what a wealth edge is, a carpenter could, because I have clients that'll come to me and they'll say, hey, we got to do investments. And I'll say, okay, well, we'll start talking. And, let's use the carpenter example. That carpenter is able to, maybe buy a flip house and put, fix it up, sell it. Maybe they could put a suite in the basement. I don't have those skills to move walls and, put in kitchens and all that stuff. So my risk is higher for me to take that project on, or my profit is lower because I'm going to have to hire it out. Where that particular person could lower risk, buy a rental property, do the sweat equity, work on it, and get a lower risk, better potential investment. So what, for coaches, consultants, people using your platform, their wealth edge is knowledge and understanding of the internet and the ability to share knowledge and sell it, and find the right people. So in your audience, my coaching would be more around, I think we could get a better return from first and foremost, building up your business to a level where it is producing enough, where we need diversification, where it becomes, hey, let's use, say you have an extra $1,000 a month. In a year, that's $12,000. In 10 years, that's $120,000. Even if you're getting 7, 8, 9, 10%, it's not money that you're going to retire on. If you took that money and embedded in that in your business, in Facebook advertising or whatever, into your platform, into probably ads, because there's lots of coaches that say like, well, how are you going to grow if no one knows you? So putting that money into there, if you got a good product, then putting that advertising money out. But I would say the flexibility really would come probably above $2,000 a month. $2,000 a month that you're already building your business and you've still got $2,000 and up to do something with. So again, I talked about the spending accelerator. I think an easy way for people to do their first investment would be, do I have a house? Am I living in a house? And is that something that I like ownership? In our region, that has worked out well. In other regions, if, again, I don't know the exact areas in the US, but if that hasn't been working out, or like the flat values are flat, lots of coaches say, why would you tie up $200, $300, $400, $1 million in a house and say, yeah, I've got my house paid off? It's like, you could take that $1 million, rent a place for $25,000, $30,000 a year, take the $1 million and buy a 12-plex, rent it out, collect income. It's just like, kind of look at it like that. But in our society, and again, I think I believe in home ownership. I think it's safe and secure and all that stuff. But I think there is a rumbling now of people realizing, and I even have older clients now where their houses are worth 1.8 million or 2 million or 1.5, and they just say, we don't have kids here anymore. The likelihood of them coming and staying with us, or the grandkids, is like 1 or 2 times a year. So we're going to go to a townhouse. We're going to sell for 1.8. We're going to buy for 800, and we're going to have $1 million in investments or cash. And that's very, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's been kind of taboo to like not own your house. Well, when you do the math, you think, well, what could you buy that you could rent out? Well, for $1 million, that would probably be a $4 million place. Now you're getting into some good rent numbers, and you could probably make it work.
Yeah, that's great. So another question then is, how would you ensure that your clients stay on track to meet their financial goals?
We use something called a Life Clarity Summit. And I like details and I like over planning stuff. I took engineering in school, but what I don't like is a 100-page financial plan that I have to like read. And as soon as you build them, they're usually wrong. So we drew a 1-page Life Clarity Summit. And what the Life Clarity Summit is at the bottom of your, it's a shape of a pyramid. The base of the pyramid, the biggest, widest kind of part, is your financial plan. What does that mean? That is just a conversation around your goals, your BAM, and what do you have? And the what do you have is just like, what are your investments? What are your savings account? What's your life insurance? What's your debt? What's your real estate? If you were to write down your investment accounts, savings accounts, real estate, mortgage payment, any other debts on a piece of paper and just had all of your stuff on one place, you would be ahead of probably 40 or 50% of North Americans. So that's becomes your financial dashboard. This is my speedometer. This is my stuff. Okay. So base of the pyramid, financial plan. Next layer up is risk management. So I've got my goals and I want to get to X. I want to double my revenue in my business in the next year. What would get in the way of that? A risk would be if you got disabled or sick and couldn't work on your business. So what are the protection mechanisms I have? Well, my family is significantly wealthy. They'd help me out. Okay, well that might not be a responsible adult thing to say, but at the same time, I've heard that. Other people might say, hey, I'm the only income earner for my family. That would be very bad. So listener, if you are the only income earner for your family and your income stops, what is the plan? So disability insurance, critical illness insurance, those are two things that can help with that. Savings could be used. Refinancing your house could also be used. So again, there's options. Doesn't mean if insurance is the end all be all, but it's a bit of a hedge. A will. It's 51% of North Americans don't have a will. So that's a lot of lost tax revenue or lost money to taxes for the next generation. And it's a lot of headaches for a lot of people. Because as someone who is sort of dealt with estates and seen clients go through it, not having a will is not a very fun thing. Second of all, you've got personal spending, health, and leisure. So again, a lot of financial planners don't necessarily talk about it, but I think it is important that there is a healthy amount of spending, and that is in your risk management bucket. That spending, especially with spouses, so you, your partner, and money, is a very interesting three-way. And if you don't get that right, it'll lead to half your net worth. And that is a very real thing. So making sure that you have, I've given you a couple tools, the BAM, the spending accelerator, and just having a conversation with your spouse. My wife and I don't know why, but every September, that's when my disability insurance kind of thing comes around, but we review it and say, hey, is this enough disability insurance based on our thing? And we'll say, okay, well, how much do we spend? We will pull out our Visa statement. So on your online banking, you can print your last 3 months of Visa statements. We print them. It's a safe environment. No one's allowed to get mad at each other. And it is a review of where does the money go? That's all we're trying to figure out. No one's trying to point the finger. Again, we all believe that our partner maybe spends in the wrong places, but this is just life. So if, two things are going to happen. I usually see that some of the things I spend on or the subscriptions I have are not in line with my goals and values. And so I can tweak those and get rid of them. My wife realizes, okay, maybe I do spend at a certain place more than I thought. And so, again, if those are going to continue, we just build that into the plan. It's like, that's not going to change. We're 40 years old. Like, this is probably going to be what it's going to be. So you've got now this framework. So what do we do in the financial pyramid or the Life Clarity Summit? Financial plan at the bottom. Risk management, which includes what happens if you die, get sick, get hurt. And then the next layer up is your accumulation. So once you get your plan, once you get your risk managed, we're going to start accumulating things, saving for retirement, real estate ownership, debt pay down, saving for your kids' education. And one that's often, again, overlooked is mental health. What are you nourishing your mind with? What sort of things are you putting in your brain? You are the the sum of the 5 closest influences around you. That could be your wife, ex-wife, coworkers, boss, kids, and just really sort of asking yourself, these thoughts I have, are they actually right? And you don't have to believe the thoughts that you have. And I think that's super important because we see it where people are significantly wealthy, age 60, 65. They've got terrible relationships with their family. They've got bad sort of negative mindset in their head, which leads to loneliness because no one wants to be around you. And then you've got this spiral that happens. So again, wealth to us is not necessarily the biggest amount of money. It is, kind of all these pieces. And the final pinnacle, the peak of the Life Clarity Summit is selling your business and estate planning. So that's the preservation. So we got financial plan, risk management, accumulation, preservation, and transfer to the next generation. So that would be, a really simple way for someone to kind of visualize, how do I get organized?
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. And I like that you got into the health idea too. I didn't even get into how you have these different hobbies of snowboarding and golfing, fishing, shooting, all that. And I think it's maybe a little bit less common for someone in the financial or wealth management space to be also talking about mental health and that kind of thing. But definitely like that's the way I always see it. That like, especially in the US with the prices of health insurance and medical procedures and all that, like it makes more sense to invest in mental health and physical health and the foods that you buy, things like that. Like, yes, it's more expensive to buy an organic thing or whatever, but really it's probably not the worst return on your investment, considering that if you don't take care of yourself, what you'll actually have to spend later on.
100%.
But
my
not,
wife and I
and
talk
not
about
only
it.
spending, to be very clear, not only spending, but like what you'll put yourself through, like physically and mentally, what you'll have to deal with, of like, as far as enjoying your life.
Yeah, and I guess you and I are maybe fairly young. Maybe we're naive to when you get older, you think different. But I think it does start with being very intentional. It starts with talking openly with your partner and saying, I don't know how many, listener, if you're married or newly married and have a child and have a partner, or you're older and you have new wife or children, life is busy, and it's easy to sort of get going in a direction, especially once you got kids, once you got a business, once you got friends, a partner or a spouse that organizes stuff. You're going to be going. It's like going on a river. And where I've learned sort of one thing, and my wife and I talk openly about it, is having our own hobbies. We have hobbies that we do together. We have things that we do as a family, and we specifically allow each other to have, not allow, but we specifically make time to do things that we like by ourselves. And again, that, mine's snowmobiling. That's a 1 day a week thing that I'm out for the winter. So my wife knows, okay, she calls herself a winter widow, but it's like for 4 months, I'm probably going to be 1 day a week going to be gone. And then the rest of the summer, I'm around, and we, really max out the fun. But where it doesn't work is you give up all your hobbies, you get into all these, family oriented things, which is super important. Then the kids move out of the house at 20 or 22 or 23. You're looking at each other going, I don't really have the same friends. I'm not really interested in anything. I'm older and I'm not as curious anymore. I have the money, but my body's not as adapt to, doing the things I like. And you're like, okay, well, I better get into something. Meeting people when you're older isn't maybe as naturally easy. There isn't as many natural settings that it happens, and it's a lot of freaking work. And so I see a disproportionate amount of people taking the approach of like keeping current with hobbies, keep trying things, keep learning. More people are the steady Eddie, and it's sort of like, I'm retired, I've got my one thing, but you're still with your partner. So you better really like your partner. And, if you're away from each other, you have more interesting stories to talk about to each other. So I'm not saying you need to be every day doing your own thing, but whatever your balance is, and every partnership is different, that, each partner tolerance is different, but that is super important. And I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about now. It's something we work at all the time. It wasn't definitely this smooth before, and it could be a lot smoother, but at the same time, you need to be aware of things and be intentional about how you're living your life.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. I think, what was I going to add about that? Just that, like having your own hobbies, your own time to yourselves as well. Like, as you said, like it's easy to get stuck in living a certain way. Everyone's brain wants to get into this pattern and is really good at following this pattern. And so when you each have your own hobbies and experiences that you're doing separately, like you're both able to bring more to your relationship together, because now you have these other experiences that you had outside where there's these new inputs or experiences that you can bring together and talk about and grow with each other with. So definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I've got one more question for you today, and that is if you could ask anything to our audience, what would that be? So something that you're curious about, something you want our audience to think about, what would that be?
Well, if it's a mechanism for getting feedback, it would be, what is the biggest pain point of being a consultant, coach, online person? What is it? The listener, you're thinking, well, this is what it is. Send Brian a note. It's like, this is the biggest pain point. No handcuffs on the topic. It just could be anything. That would be very interesting for me to know. And why I say that, I think, is the first thing that popped in my head is usually confidence in something that you're unconfident in. When you are starting to get more confident in that topic, it is because you've become more confident in some other area of your life. So we use the tools that I've talked about: BAM, Spending Accelerator, Life Clarity Summit, Financial Dashboard, for people who haven't felt comfortable in sort of life in general, to bring it all together and go, okay, well, outside of finances, there's only very few things that are complicated or hard to talk about in life. Or, some people get it more naturally, but for most people, it's a very friggin' important topic. So, and again, we haven't talked about, should you invest in stocks or crypto? We're just getting clarity on where you are. And for a lot of people, that confidence then leads into their business. It leads into their relationship. It leads into the workouts that they have, because they start seeing things different. You start seeing your finances not as a drag. You start seeing them, oh, okay, well, these guys just sort of repositioned a few things. It's the same stuff that I had the day before, but it now is organized in a way that's like, okay, I can see progress. I can see what I'm supposed to do now. Then when you go to the gym, you're not, I'm achy and painy. It's like, I'm here to do something. In your relationship, you're not shying away from the conversation with your wife. It's like, hey, we're married, we love each other, but we got to talk about this. And that analogy I used with the 3 months of visa statements is a great way to start. Or just even using, we have a tool, I'm happy to send it out to your listeners, is the BAM tracker, the bare ass minimum. And if nothing else, you print it, we'll send it to you, you print it, you put it on the paper, put it on the table, and say, I just want to talk about where the money goes for me and for you. It isn't about challenging where you spend the money. It is also for me to get awareness about where this money goes. And so, listener, if that resonates with you, I think it's very powerful. And there's a lot of other parts of your life that you'd become more confident in just by getting a little more clear on your finances.
Awesome. All right, great. All right, well, thanks so much, Dustin. Before we get going, where else can people find you online?
Sure. So it's servisswealth.com is our main website. So it's SERVISS wealth.com, or The Picture of Wealth, or what we call TPOW podcast. And I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, all that stuff.
All right, awesome. Thanks.